Yeah, and that was a Category 1 storm. This is forecast to be a Category 4 hurricane upon landfall. So yeah, Mike, thanks a lot. Great information there. I mean, I remember that live shot well, and I remember thinking how many trees were going on in Tallahassee. So let's talk about this, okay? Because I know that there are right now a lot of parents freaking out, thinking, what is going to happen to my child? Are they in the dorms? Are they in an apartment? Or whatever the case may be. So there's a couple of lines of thought, and I just had a conversation with my son about this very thing. So first of all, you think to yourself, there's also very heavy rain and very squally weather out ahead of the hurricane that is about ready to move into the Tallahassee area, into the northern Gulf. So that's already there. So if you're thinking last minute, this doesn't arrive until 7 o'clock tomorrow morning, do we still have time to get out? Do you really want to get in a car and go on I-10 when the traffic could very easily be bumper to bumper and you might literally be stuck on I-10 because of a traffic? We had some pictures, Jackie Calloway mentioned this earlier on. We had some pictures from some people earlier today where literally it was bumper to bumper, the cars were stopped on I-10. And I have a feeling when this advisory has just come out that there's going to be a lot of people heading out. Now, you might want to suggest to your children, maybe there's a shelter nearby if you don't feel comfortable where they are. But Mike hit the nail on the head. And this is the thing that we have preached since day one. You hide from the wind, you run from the water. The overwhelming majority of injuries and deaths from a hurricane come from water and surge. And that will not be an issue in Tallahassee. So you guys know me, I'm pretty transparent with my family life, with my kids and whatnot. And I'll tell you what I did. I told my son to stay put. I told my son that if the winds start to really kick near a window, you go in the bathroom, as Michael just said, you go in the bathtub, you shut the door, and you ride it out for a couple of hours. To me, as a parent, and I'm not suggesting you do the same thing for your kids. I'm not doing that. I wouldn't do that. I'm just saying, in my opinion, I feel you'll be safer riding something out in your home, in your apartment, in your dorm, wherever the case may be, as opposed to, one, getting in a car, going in traffic, riding through storms as it is, maybe not even with a hotel out there. You would want to go west, by the way, if you're going to go anywhere. You definitely don't want to go south or east. But at the end of the day, it's a decision that I think a lot of parents are mulling right this second. But also one more thing, and then we'll get into our weather, which obviously pales in comparison to what's going on. You need to call your kids right now. You need to text your kids right now and have a conversation with them. Because I think we all know with kids, they're invincible. They don't really think about what needs to be done because usually the parents have done it for them for the first 18, 19, 20, 21 years, whatever the case may be. We've always made the decisions, right? In this particular case, you need to share with them the ways that they need to stay safe. And one of which would be you go into an interior room away from windows if we are looking at what appears to be, and I've been saying this now for 6 hours, this thing's going to be very, very close to Tallahassee, and there will be hurricane winds. Now, that does not mean they're going to get the Cat 3 or 4 winds. Be really clear about that. Hurricane force winds extend 25 miles out from the center. That's 75 mile an hour winds. There's probably only a 5, 6, or 7 mile area that actually has these winds that are going to go 120 to 130. It's a small area, but you at least want them to know what to do if that area goes on top of where they are. All right? So I know you're here to watch what's happening to us locally, but I also know we have a ton of viewers watching right now on streaming because this broadcast is on streaming. Tens of hundreds of thousands of people watching. I've seen the numbers. And as well as watching at home, we have a lot of people with kids up in that area and family members. And so it's a conversation I want you to have right now. I want you to contact their kids. And on my Facebook page, if you scroll down, there is a list of about 35 things that they can still do. Some of them it's too late, clearly, but there's a lot of things that they can do to prepare for if there is the power outage. You know, dealing with the flashlights and dealing with the water, filling your bathtub up with water, filling anything up with water, putting it in the freezer if you can. So these are all tips on my Facebook page. In fact, you know what I'll do? After I'm done right now, I'm going to go ahead and repost that so it'll be the top thing on my Facebook page. and you can share it with them or have them go on my page and see it, because there's some stuff that can be really, really helpful in terms of not just riding out the storm, but here's the other thing, and I promise I'll be done at that point. Not just riding out the storm, but the aftermath. Because I guarantee you, none of your kids, and none of us, or most of us, have not gone through the aftermath of a major Category 4 hurricane, because it is absolutely the worst. I mean, you have no power for weeks. There's going to be a ton of trees down, and there probably, if this plays out the way it could, I'm guessing classes could be shut down for a foreseeable future in many places, if you can believe that. But if that is the case, they may have a tough time getting home for a little while, because there's going to be so many trees down. So they're going to have to do what they're going to have to do to be okay until they can get home. And it all depends on just the routes that they can go. I mean, maybe they could go west and then go up around. I mean, there's ways to do it. But these are things that you need to think about right now and reach out to your kids, because this is going to make landfall tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock. It's going to be really close to Tallahassee, and it's going to be a major, major storm. And I want to go over to Jason now, because Jason went to FSU. He knows that area like the back of his hand. Yeah. So maybe you can give some more insight for parents right now who are obviously freaking out, wondering what's going to happen with their kids.
Yeah, and like you said, I think this is going to be historic. It is definitely the strongest storm in the Appalachian Bay that we have ever seen in modern history. Records in Florida go back to the 1800s, so we've never seen anything like this. And anybody alive today has not seen a storm move into the Appalachian Bay like we're seeing out there over the next 12 to 18-hour period. So FSU, FAMU, they're right next to each other in southwest Tallahassee, just to the north of the airport. Tallahassee's a pretty small town. It's a small town. It's our capital city, but it is a pretty small town. A few 100,000 people live there. Building codes, obviously after Hurricane Andrew, the building codes were all updated. So any building that was built after the 90s, of course, we've seen the building codes improve there as well. So the newer buildings in Tallahassee are just fine. Of course, there's a lot of building on FSU and FAMU's campuses, so thankfully those buildings should be just fine. The problem in Tallahassee is it's a much smaller town, and there's only one way in and one way out, basically. You have I-10 that goes through there. You got a couple of out places that you can go. One will take you to Dothan, the other will take you up to Thomasville, Georgia. So there are a couple of routes that if they do decide to leave, that they can go to. But like Dennis suggested, we suggest going west, because if you go north or east, they're going into the path of the storm. And with the storm moving at nearly 20 miles per hour and increasing forward momentum, this will likely increase the time stamp, decrease the amount of time that they have to go into the east and northern sections. So if you do go west, look for places like Dothan. You got Mariana, places that were hit pretty hard by Michael, even down toward Panama City, and then back west to Crestview, Pensacola, Navarre, Destin. These areas are all potential places that if you did go west, you could potentially find a place to stay. Also, one of the issues with Tallahassee, especially outside of downtown in Leon County, is it's one of the most densely forested areas within the state of Florida. If you've ever driven from Jacksonville to Pensacola on I-10, it's one of the most boring drives that you will ever do, because there's absolutely nothing to look at except trees. And when Hurricane Michael went through Panama City and Mexico Beach and then went up to the I-10 corridor, still to this day, 5 years later, 6 years later, you can see exactly what we call the Michael scar of going through that area, because all of the trees were, if they did not get knocked over or sliced in half, they were all debarked. There were no tree branches left on them. There were no leaves left on them. All those trees coming down, of course, hit the power lines. So that was a Category 5 storm. This is going to be a Category 4 potentially at landfall. And it's also going to be the strongest storm to ever move into the Leon County area, including Tallahassee. So back in 2016, you had Hurricane Hermine. That was the Category 1 that Paluska and Dennis were just talking about. That had 80-mile-per-hour winds, and it put a lot of Leon County without power for several weeks, talking 2, 3, almost 4 weeks that some people had no power. So that's what we're looking at with this situation. I think the buildings will be fine, even at a Category 4 strength. If the center goes over downtown Tallahassee, the buildings should be fine. It's the trying to get power back and trying to get things back to normal that are going to take a long time. Because again, we've never seen this happen in this part of the Sunshine State before. This is a record-breaking storm on a multitude of platforms, but for us in Florida and for me as an FSU alumni, it's extremely disheartening to see that this is what's happening. So with that being said, we're going to keep you posted on it. We're going to keep talking to our friends and family between here and Tallahassee. And if you do have a kid that's there, a student that is there, like Dennis said, you kind of need to treat this as if it's a tornado. We always talk about a tornado warning. You get to the lowest level of your home, put as many walls between you and the outside winds that could possibly be picking up debris and lunging it at the building. You almost need to treat it like it's a tornado warning. So if you can get to the bathroom, put some blankets and pillows over top of you, and then you can ride out the storm. With it moving at 20 miles per hour, we're talking about a window of about 1 to 3 hours for the worst part of the winds. This isn't slow moving like Hurricane Ian was, that was crawling at 6 miles per hour. And unfortunately, people were stuck in the eye wall for 4 to 5 hours, even up to 6 hours. Some people were stuck in the eye wall because of how large Ian's eye was and how slow it was moving. So with that being said, I think there are going to be significant consequences of this storm as we look into the Tallahassee metro area. And again, it's going to take quite a bit of time for that area to recover after this. I also want to give you an update too on the storm surge potential. So while it hasn't changed for us and our storm surge, which is just now getting underway, and we're going to talk more about that, the storm surge potential in Tallahassee unfortunately has jumped up, at least east of Tallahassee. You don't have to worry about the storm surge in the city because they're far enough inland that it'll go stay well south of them. But for the Appalachee Bay, the new numbers are now 12 to 16 feet of surge. If you remember back with Hurricane Ian, I hate to compare hurricanes, but we saw what Ian did with a 15-foot surge in Fort Myers Beach. We could see very similar scenes to that. The difference, though, is Fort Myers Beach, Naples, so populated, 400, 500,000 people living there. That is not the case here along the coast in the Appalachee Bay. Significantly lower population, not as much infrastructure, not as much buildings and commercial businesses, but there are some towns like St. Mark's, there are some towns like Horseshoe Beach, Keaton Beach. These are some areas near Alligator Point as well, Shell Island, Wakulla Beach, that may have some big time damage that's going to be coming out of this storm. So that's the very latest with what's happening with the update that came in at 11 o'clock. That update, though, did not change the numbers for us here from the Chassahowitzka River up to the Withlacoochee River. This is Citrus County, still looking at the potential for up to 11 feet of surge. 7 to 11 is the area that we're looking at. With the storm shifting a little more west, and Dennis has been talking about this all day, the farther west it goes, the lower these numbers will be. So our fingers are crossed that while we don't want to see any surge, the chance is that with this storm being 150 miles away from our coast, even with the onshore winds now beginning to move in, that it could be far enough away to keep these numbers on the lower side versus them being up on the higher side. I want to show you the radar here at home too, because we are looking at some pretty strong storms in some areas. You're probably hearing some rumbles of thunder. We got a lot of lightning, and of course we are still looking at the potential for a few isolated tornadoes. That's what the red box is. Tornado watch is in effect until 6 a.m. So where we're looking at the potential for a few isolated tornadoes tonight is going to be in these bands that are coming on shore here through Sarasota and Manatee counties. Good news though, I'm looking at multiple sources, including on a radar app that I have on my phone, and I'm not seeing anything that is picking up my interest as far as any kind of an imminent threat for a rotating supercell. There are a couple of areas of some spin, but I think overall what these storms are doing, producing those tropical storm force winds, thankfully not hurricane force winds because those hurricane force winds are staying offshore, but this is what it looks like on the radar back here at home. Now though, I want to show you one more point and then I'll get it over to Wendy and Jameson for an update. There's the eye. Here's where we are in Pinellas and Hillsborough County. So the eye is now at our latitude, which means our winds are beginning to shift back to onshore winds. All day today, it's been offshore. The water rises we have been seeing have been associated with the king tide. That high tide earlier this afternoon led to street flooding in Fort Myers Beach. We saw it in Shore Acres in St. Pete. And also I had a friend on Longboat Key, the north end of Longboat Key, where the bay water came back in on the backside of Longboat Key just from the king tide. Well, now we're taking the high tides happening here within the next 3 hours, and we've got the winds that are funneling onshore and pushing all the water back to the coast. This is going to start to allow those water levels to climb, and we have high tide generally between 12 and 3. It's different in every spot here on the beach because that's just the nature of the way it goes. But over the next 3 hours, we'll watch and see how high these water levels start to rise. Hopefully, again, staying on the lower end of the scale, but the potential is there from 2 to 4 feet here from Sarasota County south, 3 to 5 feet from Englewood up through, we'll say the middle of Longboat Key, so right at the Sarasota-Manatee County line. 4 to 6 feet for Pinellas and Hillsborough County, including all of Tampa Bay. And then we'll see the 6 to 9 and 7 to 11 foot surge as the eye comes up and moves those winds back onshore. So right now up north, we still have an offshore wind, but down south, we've got the onshore wind, and that's where the surge is going to start to pick up. So that's the very latest, guys. We'll get it over to you, Jameson and Wendy, for an update.